I would suggest you watch this video all the way through and pause whenever you need time to catch up. I'm going to start off with a watercolor wash. So we're just going to dip that sponge brush into the water and we're going to paint our whole canvas. Then we're going to dip our paintbrush into the blue, just a little bit of the blue, and we're going to go from top to bottom and we're going to put that on there. We don't need to get real fussy with our color at all because we're going to dab it out. Take that paper towel, crunch it up, and make it all different types of shapes and sizes in there. And we're just going to dab, dab, dab. That way it looks a little bit more like it's underwater. I want to grab my paintbrush and get that blue paint out of his eye. I also have my napkin and I'm dabbing it out. I think I let my paint dry a little bit too much, but reconstituting it with water will work for you too. So you do need to work quickly when you're dealing in washes. I can also go back in with a little blue if I've taken too much paint off, but he has white part of his eyes and I want the white part of his eyes to stay white, and I really don't want to have to paint over with white. It's just easier to do this way. Now we want all of this dry. I have a heat gun. Don't let your kids use a heat gun, they get too hot, but I have one handy in my studio. You can use a blow dryer or just let it air dry naturally. This looks a little weird, but what I'm doing is I've got my sponge brush and I've got a little bit of water on it, and I'm putting a watercolor wash, just the water, on there. I want to make my axolotl purple. I'm okay that I've got blue there. I'm kind of blending that blue in so it doesn't have the the marks that the paper towel made it, but I'm also wanting it to be a tiny bit wet before I start that purple. We're going to make a purple wash for him. I have about 5 dabs of water, and then I'm going to get 1 dab of the purple paint. And I'm going to mix that really, really good. I don't want any chunks left over in there before I start. I like to work top to bottom quite often. It really depends on what I'm doing and where there might be wet paint. But I just started at the top and I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. I'm not too worried about my brush strokes. As long as there's enough water there, everything will kind of smooth out in the end. Don't forget about his tentacles. Now, this is a really small area, and I'm using the tip of the side of the brush, but don't get yourself all worked up about making these little areas perfect. They're kind of teardrop shapes, but later on we're going to be going in with a Sharpie, a black Sharpie, and outlining everything. So just get them on there and don't worry about them being perfect. That Sharpie outline will make nice smooth lines for you. I did make my paint just a tiny bit darker so they can stand out from the rest of the body, and I let some of that paint pool on there so it will be darker. You can do that too. It just looks a little nicer. Alexa, do I have a new notification?
One new notification from Alexa News. From Fox, President Biden will not visit Kennedy Ranch site in East Palestine, Ohio. Do you want to hear more about this?
No, thank you. Now that you have that done, I'm going to show you a little trick. I'm using the back of my brush. I'm using full strength paint, and that's how I'm putting all of his little spots on, even that big one there. The trick to this is you really do need quite a bit of paint on there. You don't want the tip of that brush to touch your canvas very much because that'll make like a streak mark, almost like you're taking the paint off. So have a lot of paint. Don't push on the canvas, just glide it within the paint, and you're really just moving paint around. We're going to let those spots dry and we're going to start working on the seaweed. I'm going to just take the straight yellow and start the seaweed. Take a look at the seaweed. Some of the seaweed sits in front and some of the other seaweed sits in back. You want your lighter colors on the ones in front and your darker colors on the ones in back. I have 3 different colors. I have this yellow, and then I make a yellowish green, and then we just have a straight green that we've made with yellow and blue. But all of it is just a wash. The greens are a wash. This yellow, it's thin, so it acts as a wash. I'm going to go ahead and insert a full done picture so you can see where I have all of the different colors. I'm a little off camera, but I'm mixing up a blue and a green to make my light green. When I have all of those light greens, I put a little bit of blue in that mixture to make it a little bit darker for my darkest greens. Here's your finished piece so you can actually see where the different greens are in the seaweed. We're going to just use straight blue to do the color part of his eyes. I'm just using the tip of that brush. If you have a smaller brush sitting around, you can go ahead and go and get that smaller brush and use it. But I always say use the biggest brush you possibly can. The more practice you get with that, the better you will be. We're going to go ahead and do all of the blue parts of his eyes. Notice, if you get it into the black area, that's not going to be a big deal because it's going to be black. It'll go right over it. You really don't want it in the white area. But also remember, we're going to be going over with Sharpie. So we will be able to correct a little bit of that. You saw me turn that over. This is a great time to turn the painting over so it's easier for you to make those curved lines. Okay, I want to let you know, everything is dry on this canvas. It's not damp, it's not tacky, everything is completely dry. That's why I've got the marker now. If you try to use that Sharpie and things are just a little bit wet or tacky, you're going to ruin your Sharpie. Also, a few tips using the Sharpie. I want you to look at where you're going, not where your Sharpie is. Go ahead and use the Sharpie for the black part of his eyes. You could use black paint, but since this is such a tight area, the Sharpie's going to be so much easier for you to do. And see that little white speck on his pupil? Be very careful around there. Another tip, make confident strokes. See how I did that mouth? I didn't stop in the middle of it. I made a confident stroke, just like all the way around these tentacles. I find a good spot that I can stop at, but every time I stop, I have a chance of making jaggedy lines or the nib. You have to really match it up to where you were at. If you do have to match it up, go a little bit in on your line and then make another confident stroke. See, I went all the way around that cheek. I didn't stop. I was confident. I looked where I was trying to get to, not where I was at. Enjoy some music and finish your outline. Don't forget to jazz up those tentacles with some outlines too. This will help if it was a little bit messy when you were putting them on there. Now you see I painted my sides with just that straight blue. You're going to want to do that and let it dry before you do this step. So my sponge brush doesn't have a lot of water in it, and I dab just a little bit of black. I start at the right hand corner, and you can see how I'm measuring out each space. So I have the black, and then I measure to keep the blue there, and then I measure again. Once I get to the end, it's not going to be the same exact amount, and then I start over at the edge. I hope you had fun painting with me.